everybody. We're about to get going. Welcome back. And we are going to start with the cosmic connection point I like to refer to as Stargate Detroit. This is really where I got started with all this, is discovering some of the symbolism we're going to talk about right now. And we're going to start off by taking a step back in history, once again, with the founding of the city of Detroit. 1701. This is French explorer Antoine Cadillac. In 1701, Cadillac sailed out of Montreal, looking for the perfect place to found the city of Detroit. He's coming down the Detroit River with his crew of 20 other boats, and he points out what he believes to be the perfect spot to found the new city of Detroit. They pull the boat ashore, he plants his flag, and the perfect spot was what was now referred to as Hart Plaza. We'll talk about Hart Plaza in just a minute. Now, when Cadillac was sailing down the Detroit River, this area was sacred and hallowed ground to the local Native Americans. Belle Isle and Peach Isle, you can see in the far distance, this was actually known as the realm of the gatekeeper. The realm of the gatekeeper of all things. And there were also a lot of sacred mounds. This was a sacred mound site where Hart Plaza now occupies, where the pulled his boat ashore. And well, many people felt that the Native Americans had built these mounds, but the natives themselves claimed to have just occupied the mounds. Even the native Indians claimed not to know who the mound builders were. Some recalled old legends that their ancestors had conquered and ousted an ancient evil civilization, as they referred to them, that had dug for copper and built these mounds. So, imagine the disbelief when they start excavating some of these mounds, and they're starting to build a new city of Detroit. And in these mounds are ancient relics such as these. These are known as the Michigan relics. And very few people even know about these relics, which is very sad. Now, the problem with these relics, according to archaeologists, they did not have a Native American theology incorporated on them. They had more of a Gnostic or Egyptian, maybe even a Coptic feel to them. And there's thousands, upwards of 10,000 of these relics discovered here. A lot of them were clay relics, clay pots, ossuary boxes, a lot of copper relics. Remember, the natives claimed a group had come here to mine for copper. And a lot of slate relics. And these are my favorite. Just incredible symbolism on these relics. But just like I showed you in St. Louis, these are considered forgeries. Archaeologists point the finger at these two guys. They called them the culprits. Father James Savage and ex-Secretary of State Daniel Sober. And well, according to archaeologists, they said these two guys must be in a back shed or a back barn somewhere, forging these relics, traveling the entire state of Michigan, including the Upper Peninsula, finding ancient burial mounds, sometimes on farmers' private property, sneaking in there, burying these relics, waiting years to the ground grew trees, and then they would come back and bring witnesses and uncover these relics. Well, they said this happened for 30 years. These guys never got caught, and that's kind of where the story ends, as far as archaeologists are concerned. Most of these relics are now in the Michigan Historical Museum. And
this goes all the way to Ontario, Canada.
Yes,
In the mountain area, and I know about it.
yeah, these relics have been discovered all over North America, through Canada, but they're always declared forgeries. Always declared forgeries. So they thought, in Detroit, it must be these two guys doing it. And they went around and they took witnesses when they uncovered them, but they said it still was a trick, maybe even a sleight of hand maneuver by one of these guys. Well, that's where the story leaves off. Now a lot of these are in the Michigan Historical Museum. They're not even on display. They're in the back room collecting dust.
Public education.
Yep. But there's another side to the story. Not too long ago, 10, 20 years, a Supreme Court judge called into these ancient relics. And just like me, he cannot comprehend how two guys could forge all of these relics. Thousands of them. And well, he had a great idea. Let's have a professional handwriting analysis done on these relics. And when they did a professional handwriting analysis, it came back that each and every relic was done by a different hand. So if that's true, either we had thousands of people forging these relics, or it's possible that an outside race had come and visited this particular area here in Michigan, considered it hallowed ground, and left us information to rediscover. And I'm just briefly going over this story to show you a couple more relics. Tower of Babel. Oh, there he is again, the Pale Prophet. And, if you're interested in this, I go a lot more detail in my book, The Mystical Michigan, Mystical Men. But the point I'm making is this not only was hallowed ground, the area we're going to talk about today, to the Native Americans, but possibly a race even before that, from across the seas. This could have been a very special landscape for thousands of years. So now we're going to move up the timeline a little bit, the time of the founding fathers. This is Augustus Woodward, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Woodward Avenue down here. We're going to walk down it today. It's named after Mr. Augustus Woodward, and he was a Freemason, and he was also best friends with Thomas Jefferson. Now, he was actually known as Thomas Jefferson's disciple. There's a book wrote about it. This was Thomas Jefferson's disciple. And surprisingly, not too many people have heard that. And well, when Thomas Jefferson finally gets appointed president, he sends his disciple, his buddy, Justice Augustus Woodward, out to Michigan, appoints him the first Chief Justice of Michigan. And when he gets here, the city had just burnt down in the Great Fire of 1805. So when Mr. Woodward arrives, at that time the city motto was, "We hope for better days that will rise again from the ashes." Obvious Phoenix reference. From its inception, Detroit has been a city of rebirth, right from its inception. So what happens is Augustus Woodward comes out here, the city had just burnt down, and he appoints himself city planner. He decides to redesign the street layout of the city of Detroit. Well, he was also acquaintances with Pierre Lafont, the French architect who did Washington, D.C. city plan. And the story goes that Woodward actually copied down a lot of Lafont's symbolism over his shoulder and came to Detroit and incorporated some of the same symbolism. So we're going to take a look at Augustus Woodward's very first map he created. Just for reference, the center circle is his Grand Circus Park. This is still here in Detroit. And at the bottom is Campus Martius. Martius is Latin for the Field of Mars. And we're going to visit the Field of Mars a little bit later on our walk today. Now there's nowhere that I've been able to find where it says exactly what symbolism Woodward meant to implement. So all we can do is really speculate at this point. And concentric rings obviously fit very, very well in there. And well, Augustus Woodward, in one of his books, The Substance of the Sun, he actually wrote about the New Atlantis. Viewed top down, could resemble a pyramid over that. The Templar cross fits very snugly. And the pentagram and the pentagon fit perfect above and below, as well as the hexagon and the hexagram. All kinds of symbolism that could be incorporated into this one map. I'd like to point out Freddie Silva, ancient sacred landscape researcher. He points out that the pentagram and the pentagon are many times used in lunar temples or female temples, and the sun, the solar temple, is many times used with the hexagon and the hexagram. Well, as you can see, Mr. Woodward was able to incorporate both of these into this one map. So we're speculating on the kind of symbolism that